and welcome to another episode of Comic Book Spectrum. And
Hi!
and we're here. we're
And
here. We're live.
it's just the two of us tonight. Cliff will be back next week.
Now you understood the meaning of the title, right? Of tonight's episode.
Oh, what what if $6 million man married the Bionic woman that never happened?
Yeah, that's what our the thumbnail is really about. I'm not certain if you're familiar with the cartoon series Bionic 6.
No. No. Okay.
Okay. The Bionic 6 was pretty much a cartoon series where a a hodgepodge family, inadvertently got into like this. Well, actually, the best way to explain it is exactly what the title is. Instead of like, you know, Steve Austin and Jamie Summers, individually having their accidents and they became bionic and everything. It was more like an offshoot of that,
Oh, okay.
where
So,
it's like the character that was supposed to be Steve Austin and the character that was supposed to be Jamie Summers actually got married before Steve Austin had his accident.
okay.
So he became a member of OSI shortly after, or the equivalent of what OSI was in the series,
Okay.
shortly after he got his bionics. So when after all this stuff had happened to him and everything, he comes back to his family. And now, mind you, by this time they had what is called a blended family. It was the character that's supposed to be Jamie Summers. They already had a son and a daughter, a natural son and a daughter. Then they adopted two sons.
Kind of Brady Bunch.
Right. And they adopted two sons. So it was like a total of six of them altogether.
Okay.
So, he was up here. It's like, okay, fine. We're about to go on this family vacation and everything to that magnitude and everything. So they're out there on this family vacation, and the kids were just asking all these asinine questions about, what it's like to have all of these high end bionics in him.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that the villain of the series ended up attacking them, and
Oh,
one thing
no.
led to another. It became a great disaster.
And the kids
So
had
the
to be
OSI group
bionified.
the group that gave the Steve Austin character his bionics eventually gave the rest of the family
They're
bionics, and it
bionics.
became the Bionic 6.
And so now the kids work for OSI too.
Mm-hmm.
I just
It's just so
the
it's just so
legal ramifications of
well.
that.
They did not they did not use the term OSI. They did not use Steve
No, no,
Austin
no.
or
I'm not
Jamie
saying
Summers.
using any of that, but the legal ramifications of performing that sort of surgery on children under the age of consent and then going, oh, now that we've given you this stuff, you have to work for us.
Well,
You know?
that's the weird thing about all of this here, because the ages of the kids, all the kids were teenagers.
Yeah, but they
I
weren't.
think the youngest one was 15.
And but even
Even
just
at 15, it was like the way that the government just up and decides, it's like, oh, you work for us.
I was about to say 18-year-olds didn't get the right to vote until late 70s.
Oh, you have to be mindful that this is a 1980s cartoon.
Okay. Because I'm like, because I'm thinking, wait a minute. 18-year-olds didn't get the right to vote until the late 70s, early 80s. And to do that, they had to argue. I remember that clearly because they had lawyers arguing. And I think a couple of young men even testified before Congress, saying the thing is I'm old enough to go serve in the army or whatever, the military, and go and be sent home in the body bag. But I'm not old enough to vote. That's kind of stupid. I'm not asking for the right to go out and get drunk. I'm just asking that if I am old enough to go and fight for my country, that I have the right to make a decision on how it's run.
Well, that's the thing. I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast. I forgot the name of the person that he had on there, and that was the key thing that he said. It's like I think he was like he went to like either Korea or Vietnam, and he's like he came back. It's like I went to Vietnam at the age of 16. I came back after my tour, and I wanted to go right back in. My my recruiter looked at me strange. It's like why do you want to do that? You already did your duty. Why are you trying to do that? It's like, and he was like with the dead in his eye said, when went over there, I went over there as a child. When I came back, well, wait, how I forget, I misphrased it. When I came into the military, I was a child.
Yeah.
While I was on the battlefield, I was a man. When I finally came back stateside, the country still treats me as a child.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you mean by? It's like, what do you mean by that? It's like I went over there at the age of 16. I'm now 18. I
And I
can't
can't vote.
drink. I can't drink. I can't smoke. I don't have any rights or privileges as an adult. I might as well go back over there and continue fighting where everybody treats me with some type of respect.
There's a sense of equality there because of the job I'm doing, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to I'm here and y'all looking at me like I'm just some punk kid.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it is. Um, but yes, I remember being a kid and hearing those arguments
Yep.
and whatnot. And I think in 18-year-olds got the right to vote. They didn't get the right to drink because they were fighting for both the right to vote and the right to drink. And they were saying, um, you have, and because, girls were arguing at 18, I have the right to, I should have the right to consent if I'm married, whatnot. So I should have the right to vote. If I can be married at 18 legally, I should be able to vote. And because there were kids giving very valid, very concise, very well thought arguments, of course they relented and they got the right to vote. But I just remember it was pretty much an uphill battle because this was also, we were coming off the hippie generation.
Well, that makes me go back to the 70s, where I was actually being thought out and born, and you were pretty much like here to kind of see what was going on firsthand. But during that time, they did kind of sort of had the right to drink until Mad and Sad and all the other stuff took over towards the tail end of the 70s. Because I remember in the early 80s, that's when they repealed that whole thing about the age of 16. The legal age to drink for drinking went from 16 to 21.
Actually, you could go in a bar at 16, but you could not drink. Um, the legal age for drinking, I think, had to be around 18 or so. Um, you could be in a bar at 16 because my stepmother dragged me into a couple of bars. Um, and I worked as a day laborer in my freshman year of high school, which meant the only place I could, after working all night, because you would work and then get your paycheck at the end of your day when they brought you back. And there was a bar that would cash everybody's check. And because I had a social security number, because I was one of the first generation of children when when I in my eighth grade year, we were that first generation that as children were allowed social security numbers. And the school made us all apply to get our social security number. So I actually had a social security number. So there I was at 17 working an adult job, but because I had a legal social security number, I could cash my paycheck. Because I gave them my information, my social security number, and they checked it, and it's like, well, it's a legal social security number.
Mm-hmm.
Even though my stuff was like, you shouldn't be telling them. And it's like, I'm not going to lie, because if I put a fake number down and they get audited,
Mm-hmm.
not only are they going to get in trouble for hiring someone at the age of 14,
Right.
but it's a fake social security number.
That's even more important. It's the fake social security number. And Carl said it was 18 for beer, 21 for hard liquor. I was there. Then halfway through, when I was 19, they moved it back. 'Cause
Yeah.
I remember all of a sudden it's like, Mad and Sad was always talking about how 16-year-olds was getting their hands on beer, and there was a lot of drunk driving at that point in time,
I
and people were dying left and right because of the
I
drinking age being in some places was allowable at 16.
I at I will admit, being 18, and you could drink in bars, but you couldn't just go buy liquor from the store, because by the time I turned 18, they had changed it. You couldn't just go in the store and buy
Hmm.
liquor. And I remember hanging out with friends during that summer, and we would pay some old guy to go in there and get hooch for us. So we could, so we could sit there and throw back some Mad Dog 2020 or whatnot. So yeah, I remember that. But like I said, I remember being 14 and getting off work at, 1 something in the morning, and hi, here's my social security number, here's my school ID, which they wouldn't look that close at, because it's like, okay, we're not gonna look that close at your school ID, because if you have ID, fine. you
Right.
know
Exactly.
and they would they would only charge me, I think I made like, I think at that time we were making 3 or 4 something an hour
Hmm.
doing a night shift. So, because I would get out of school about 2:33,
Hmm.
rush to get home, drop my books off. Then my stepmother and I would rush cross town, because the place that you had to go for to get the job was on the north side.
Oh, okay.
So we had to rush all the way. I think it was either Edgewater or Lakeview. Manpower was what they were
Hmm.
called. So you had to
No,
go.
Manpower been around for years,
Yeah,
decades.
but that was the closest office to us.
Hmm.
We were like, what, the school, DuSable's at 48th and Wabash, and we were like,
Wait, wait, you talk about the Savo High School or the
yeah, that's
Savo?
how I went to my freshman year of high school. I was at DuSable on the south side, across from the Robert Taylor.
Oh, okay.
And then we lived at, I'm trying to remember, I think like 61st or something like that. So I would have to get out of school, go walk home, drop my books and stuff off, and then she and I would hop over to what is now the Red Line.
Hmm.
We would go over to 63rd Street, catch the Red Line, because that train went all the way north. Well, no, I think you switched trains at one point, but that was how you got to
That
go
was back
north.
when Red Line was overhead.
Yeah,
Overground.
that's when it was all overhead, and it didn't go into the subway. It stayed overhead.
Green was the only one that was subway
Yeah,
during that time.
and so, but it would get on the Wabash, and then take, once it turned off, what I said, it turned at Lake and
Lake Street,
Wabash, and then
Lake.
once you got off Lake, it at Wells Street, it went right, and then continued on.
To like merchandise place and further north.
Yeah,
No,
and that's,
no, it didn't. See, now you're making me think about
it would
which
go.
line was doing. It branched off once you make that right hand turn to go further north. It kind of branches off because you had
It branches off because it would go at Belmont, what is now the Brown Line, what was then called the Ravenswood Line, would branch out at
Mhm.
Belmont and go through Ravenswood. And then what we had would continue going north,
Right. You're the
because it would
one
go
that went
past
all the way
DePaul,
towards like Loyola
DePaul
and
and Loyola.
Right.
But yeah, so we would have, I forgot where we got off, but we would, and then coming home, there were a couple of times where she didn't go with me, because I guess she and my dad would have it out. And, but it was like, you know what? I'm going. Because
You're like, I
that
want
was
my
how,
money.
well, no, because this was before free lunch.
Oh, okay.
So if I wanted lunch money, if when it was cold out and I wanted to catch the bus to get to school, or I wanted clothes for school, um, other than what my dad, because for some reason he thought at 14 I was just a very tall 8-year-old. So
No, I just picturing that's like a very tall 8-year-old. I was like, wait a second. I was like, oh wait.
I wasn't, I mean, I'm like 5 feet.
I
But
know, but you have to understand how my mind works.
if you think about how
Somebody
many,
that's a very tall, but then I have to scale it back down to an 8-year-old. It's like, oh, okay.
the 8-year-old style clothing for
Mm-hmm.
feet for a teenage body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, so if I wanted fashionable clothes, if I wanted to be able to do my hair, if I wanted to go out or have any sort of a life other than get up, walk to school,
Mm-hmm.
turn around at the end of the day and walk home, I had to earn my own money. And so,
So, yeah, Don says like, yeah, they made it 18 for hard liquor the year
I
that I
made
was
it 21.
20, and then they made it 21 when I was 21.
But it was, yeah. So I had to earn, if I wanted to, um, just survival, especially as a teenage girl. Um, if I wanted anything, I had to earn that money. And that meant I had to get a job. My stepmother was very, very clear. She was like, I am not required, because this was, they had, this was around the time they had already quit the surprise inspections via welfare. They weren't showing up at your house anymore.
Oh, but
So,
so this no, that can't be right.
yeah,
No, because I was just thinking to myself, it's like that was Nixon era type policy during that
yeah.
time.
This was after Nixon. We're
Okay,
talking. I was what? I was 14, so this is 1984.
right?
This
Because
is
I
post.
barely remember Carter. I
Yeah,
barely remember Carter administration. I barely remember that.
and it's funny because Carter. It's interesting. I remember pictures of Rosalind. I remember one of the most stirring pictures of Rosalind Carter ever taken was, it was a very candid photograph. She was sitting, I think she was in the first lady's apartment, because the first lady has a section where she has a staff
Mhm.
and whatnot, and she was sitting on the sofa, but she was turned around on the sofa. You know how sometimes you're looking out the window, so you're on the sofa, but instead of facing forward, you're back.
Mhm.
She had turned around and she was looking out the window, and they had framed it where you could see that she in many ways was this woman who was utterly alone. She did not have, it was a hard time for her, because when they went to Washington, all her friends were back home.
Mhm.
She didn't have any friends there. And the Washington establishment wives, because she was a woman of actual faith. It wasn't something they just gave lip service to.
Mhm.
They actually believed what they said they believed. Um, and because of that, a lot of Washington socialites kind of just, she was the first lady, but they kind of iced her out. She didn't get invited to things, or she got invited, but outside of a photo op,
Mhm.
they were excluding her. And so you see her back, but you can tell by the way she's sitting with her head kind of down, her arms crossed in front of her. She was utterly alone because he was dealing with the nation and the world all day. And she had a lot of time, you know, and she took that time. She had said that she looked at it, she wasn't there to make changes, she was there to preserve what was done by other first ladies. So she didn't go in there with the attitude of, oh, I'm going to tear up Jackie O's rose garden. you know, or I'm going to make the Christmas look like a bunch of bloody Tampax. This Christmas. I mean, she had advisors, and she was big on and because when she did speak out, she spoke out for children, she spoke out for the underprivileged. She it That was at the time that a lot of nonprofits, when they had something, they would go to her, and that became her mission while she was first lady, was to do as much as she could for those who didn't have. And it was a struggle because it was kind of like, the expectation of a first lady is yeah, you pick, now first ladies pick a project, but back then you just hosted a bunch of little events. And she was sort of stuck in that. She really wasn't part of that social scene. And she didn't want to be. In many ways, her biographers have said she didn't want to be part of that social scene. She found it in many ways. She found a lot of the hypocrisy
Mm-hmm.
really abhorrent. And so she didn't really want to be a part of that. Yet at the same time, she was very much alone by herself, just trying to, figure out how to navigate this. And those socialites, a lot of them were East Coast and whatnot, and they were, women can be very catty and very cruel, especially back then, since so many of those women were tied into what their husbands were doing. So they had nothing other than, you know you were who your husband was, and a lot of them were not. She was his. I think a lot of people looked down on them because in many ways she was his partner. He actually did. Um, he would discuss things with her that people felt that, oh, please, she's a woman. Why do you care what she thinks? And there were times, there would be interviews, and he would go, I'm actually going to ask Rosalind about that. Or I talked to Rosalind, and she and I, and people were like, oh, you shouldn't be saying that. You're giving her too much.
I still feel the one thing that everybody said cost him the election was the most brilliant thing that he ever did.
What, the will kick his ass statement?
No. What are we going to do about the whole thing about nuclear power?
And that's something people don't give him credit for. But what happened though was, you know, this was at the time of the Iran hostage crisis,
Mm-hmm.
took place on his watch. And I always wonder, because the Republicans and even some of the Democrats at the time, because they felt he was a little too aw shucks down home. And he would often, when he talked, he would often, you know, he was very plain spoken. He was not the double speak type of guy. That was not who he was as governor. And he had promised his people, I'm not going to become that as president. Who I am as, and he would say, who I am as governor. And that's why people voted for him, because he's like, who I am as governor is going to be who I am as president. Plain spoken, straightforward, none of this sideways wrangling stuff. Um, but I always wonder, because of how things went down when he sent when those soldiers were sent in, and he approved the operation. He didn't send them in. They came. The Joint Chiefs came and said, "We have this. We want to attempt this thing to send these guys in to go get them out."
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't his plan, but he did approve it because he believed in it. And then, things went sideways, and those guys got killed.
Mm-hmm.
And people blamed him.
Well, it was just a perfect storm of a lot of things here, because it was that, and the possibility of a nuclear threat at the same time. And they was up here asking him, if worse comes to worse, were you ready to press that button?
And his attitude was like, no. you know,
Well,
he,
again, how he stated his opinion was so forward thinking
yeah,
that it lost the people. It really lost the people. When he said that, I asked Amy, and everybody's like, "Why are you asking children about this?"
because, and if I
It's
remember
because it's
correctly,
going to be their
it's going
problem.
to be their world.
It's going to be
What
their
we
problem to
do,
deal with.
what we do today will decide whether or not they even have a tomorrow. Young people, those of us who are not yet old enough to vote, were for him in that regard because he was looking at those of us who are at the tail end of the boomers and beyond, and saying what we decide today is going to determine the world they have to live in, or if there is a world
Mm-hmm.
them to live in. This is not a choice you can make lightly.
And they saw him as weak. They saw him weak because of that. I was like, no,
No,
it was so forward thinking that those who wanted to go to war
the
didn't
Hawks
like it.
didn't like it, but kids, moms. And the thing is the Clintons learned from that because people forget. Yeah, Clinton won the popular vote, but he also won the popular vote among children.
Mm-hmm.
Nickelodeon had its first ever Kids Choose campaign because of the Clintons. I don't know if Nickelodeon approached them or they approached Nickelodeon, but it was Charles and John were just, we weren't the lucky few who could do the voting,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that they went on Nickelodeon and talked, answered questions from children, did interviews and talked to them, and then of course, Bill Bill went on nighttime TV and played saxophone, and Spielberg never let him forget it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But it was such a unique campaign, and I think, okay, when you think about the Carters, it's like, okay, I wonder if he laid the groundwork for what they did because they watched him and realized, okay. But and yeah, but there were people who, unfortunately, you had got people in power, primarily men, primarily white, um, who who wanted to maintain the status quo and were looking at women and looking at children as accessories to their lives. We didn't count as much. Women and children didn't count as much to them. And it was waving their penises. Let's be honest. This was
And
a
that would have been the
penis waving
fastest way to lose a war too.
but that's a penis waving contest. Who's got the bigger bomb? Who can do more damage? And they're so focused on how much damage you can do at the time that they don't think beyond that damage, because it's like, we'll bomb you out of existence. It's like, yeah, you're going to take a bunch of the rest of the world with them. That's the bombs at that point weren't just hit this point and be done. The nuke, you know, by the time we got to when Carter was president,
It,
what we had made Nagasaki and Hiroshima look like small change. The
that's
level
what I was
of
about to get ready to
damage.
say. That's what I'm about to get ready to say because they saw what real damage those the remainder of the atomic bombs can do
Yeah,
from
and it's not,
underwater blast because
and
they
it,
messed up so many of our troops from the radiation from it. So they knew ahead of time.
yeah, and Carter knew. And Carter was looking at this in a very human, what the human cost of. It wasn't enough to say, we're going to be victorious. It's like, there's no sense winning a war if there's no world left. Who cares who won if there's no world left? Or what world that's left is so screwed up that none of our children will have anything akin to a future. And it's something, like I said, as a young person, to me, that mattered, you know. And I was happy when he got up in the interview. I think it was, I forgot who he spoke to, but early on in the campaign when they were asking him, and he's like, yeah, we'll kick his ass. And I was like, yeah, go ahead, Jimmy, with your bad self. I just thought that was cool. And it was like, oh my goodness, he said ass, he said ass. And it's like, oh, please. That's, you know, his the man, his competition is saying horrible things. And that's what bothers you? This guy would like to bomb the world out of existence, would like to keep crushing people under his boot heel just so he can say he did. He wants to own, you know, the whole own Russia thing. And it's funny because
That would never happen.
Russia was a huge ally. People forget Russia was a huge ally in World War II. The Russian front was such a scary place to be. They made a joke out of it in Hogan's Heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And because if you anybody who got sent to the Russian front was not likely to make it home on their own volition. They if they had anything of you to send home, it wasn't going to be alive because the Russians weren't playing now. They were Stalin and Lenin were like, no, you come up in here. We just got rid of the Romanovs. Let us teach you pain. Um, the
It's
Night
like
Witches. I love
they
the
probably looked at
stories.
them as like, you really don't know our history.
It's like the
We were
night.
doing this to our own just to liberate ourselves. What do
You
you think we're going to do to you coming up in here thinking that you're going to invade?
Yeah, especially the way you think you're gonna roll up in here and then put the screws on us. No, it's not gonna go that way. I loved when they were I think it was about 10 years or so when they started talking about the Night Witches of Russia, which I thought was such a great story. These young girls, 15 to 18 years old, flying what basically crop duster planes with no armaments, no weapons, and loaded with bombs, middle of the night, darker than dark, flying down, and the Germans were calling them night witches because when they came swooping in,
You
their
just hear a
planes.
howl.
It sounded like howling and screeching and whatnot. And the Germans have a history of, you know, scary tales. So to the everyday Germans, they thought werewolves and whatnot swooping in to kill them. And here are these girls just whoop, bam, bam, bam. I just thought, yes, yes. Um, y'all just whoop that ass. Just whoop that ass. I said ass. But I just, you know, it was the Russian front, along with the bitter cold.
Mm-hmm.
It was not the Russians were cruel. They didn't they felt prisoners. No, if we take you prisoners, we got to feed you. We got enough problems. We might have you for dinner. So, they didn't want to be there. Um, the Russians, and then also I learned, because I hadn't known this, because everybody makes it out that the British, were such weaklings. And it's like, no, because East Africa, the British sent a ton of soldiers, because they had the British Empire stretched into Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So they had Chinese, Indonesian, they had African and Indian soldiers along with British, they had all their Commonwealth
Again, their
soldiers out there
intelligence.
just whooping butt all up in East Africa.
That's the
So,
reason why they had such great intelligence, because they had so much in all these other pockets of the world that it
and
was
they,
just like, how are you getting this intel? Don't worry about it.
yeah,
They're like,
and
their
because
response is like, don't worry
they
about it.
also
Just
had
trust it.
they had people on the ground in Italy, in
Hmm.
France, in Spain, whatnot, getting that intel. Even in Germany, they had people on the ground getting that information and getting it out. Even if they didn't make it out, the information made it out.
They had everyday plus celebrities on their side feeding them information. And you would never know unless they actually did something stupid to get caught.
Josephine Baker was part of the resistance. I didn't know that at first. It's like, ooh, la de yeah, you go, girl. But so, but the thing is it's interesting how we went from, and the thing is, because they gave Eastern Germany, the America gave that to Russia and said, hey, for all the stuff that you went through, because they didn't just split Berlin. It was, okay, yeah, we're going to give you this because, we owe you. So we'll at least we'll give you half of Berlin and everything on that side of it. So it wasn't like they just,
Mhm.
it was, we gave a good portion of Russia to of
German.
Germany to the
Mhm.
Russians. So it's interesting how once that was done and the space race started, suddenly they went from being an ally to this whole, oh no, they're adversaries.
It was more than that. It was
Yeah.
more than that. But space race did not help whatsoever. What I believe that actually did everything in is when Russia when we found out Russia also had atomic capabilities as well.
Yeah. How dare you have what we have?
Well, again, we played the ultimate poker game and bluffed our way through it. Because think about it. What if Germany pressed this advance knowing that we only had two atomic bombs left?
Yeah.
We played that whole game that we can manufacture these quickly. We couldn't. We only had two that were still ready.
Yeah.
And the other, what, five or six was still trying to get manufactured. And was no way that if we went to a long offensive that we would be able to produce them quick enough to force their hand.
But the Germans didn't know that.
The
And
The
it's,
Germans didn't know that, and they just looked at what happened to Hiroshima.
but I have only, start looking at information. It's like the Japanese were already in the process.
It's like you.
Okay. I'll have to look it up. But the Japanese were already in the process of talks about surrendering
Mm-hmm.
before we hit them. And the whole hitting Japan was more to tell Russia, it had less to do with Japan and more to do with Germany and Russia. Hey, we got this. We will.
Well, I
We
thought we used them as an example
That's what I'm saying.
because what happened with Midway.
But what I'm saying is because of it's the they hit us hard, we're going to completely incapacitate.
Right.
It never had to be to that. You know, this was way more than what happened at Pearl Harbor, Pearl
And
Harbor
Midway,
and Midway.
because
This
Pearl
was
Harbor, that was heartbreaking, because people keep forgetting that what happened with Pearl Harbor was beyond a sneak attack. Because why would you send your own diplomats in the middle of being attacked? Because they sent actual diplomats, and they was meeting,
they
like you
were
said,
meeting.
to negotiate a possible surrender.
So something, like I said, it's weird. Something about it doesn't. The narrative that America set didn't quite add up, and I now realize, okay, so the bombs that we dropped was less about Japan
Mm-hmm.
and more about letting Germany know, if we can do this here, we can do this to you. And it also, because the rest of Europe is seeing this, so now we're kind of putting ourselves up as we're the strong man. We may have come late to the party, but we brought the big bomb. We brought the big bomb, and we're not afraid to use it.
And that was the key thing here, because that's the reason why Pearl Harbor and Midway was like downplayed a lot, because if Japan by themselves were able to do this, think what an actual Luftwaffe would have done
Yeah,
coming into the western side of the country. They could have done a lot of damage. So
or even just even coming into the parts of the East Coast, if they came in through, say, Canada
mm-hmm.
or whatnot. If they'd come in through the North in Canada, maybe not directly at New York, but there were other ways to have come in. So this was a way of establishing ourselves as we have the biggest stick, and we're not afraid to use that stick. And if we have to wipe your ass off the face of the planet to ensure, our safety, we got no problem with that. So we were, it was what they used to say it in Star Trek: The Next Generation, cowboy diplomacy. It's very much the cowboy diplomacy. We're gonna steal all you can. We're gonna burn all your crops, take your women, steal all your cattle, and then
And
lynch
then
you.
hand you a beer and be like, "We're going to drink to this, because why? That's just the way it
That's
is."
just the way it is. And if you have something else to say, we can take you too. So yeah, it when I read more and more about what was really happening, it's a very sad thing. And I'm sure Carter, because this is how it all started, suddenly being able to see all that, because he is of that generation that was in that,
Mm-hmm.
but to be able to see the documents, and to think, no, no, this is not going to end well if we just keep proliferating it. We have to think of better solutions. We have to think of better ways. It's not enough to, walk softly and carry the big stick. We have to think of a better way of doing that. And for that reason, I've always admired him. I know there are people who are like, oh, he wasn't strong enough. It's like,
No, it
sometimes
wasn't about being
sticking
strong
by
enough.
your integrity, sticking to your beliefs, to the things that you hold as true, even if, they kind of make other people look at you and go, yeah, but that's weak. It's like, no, it was a strength.
It was better strategy in the long run, because again, during that time, it had been noted that the Russians had equivalent firepower by that time, and you were going to go into the Middle East, and hitting the Middle East with something like that would have eventually spread into Russia.
Yeah.
And that was something that, again, it's like, yeah, we could have wiped them off the planet, but you would have wiped them off the planet with some of all these other subordinate countries.
Yeah, I was supposed to say it wouldn't have been just Russia. You know, we could have taken a good portion of Eastern Europe
Hmm.
and all their history with them, you know, countries that people, it wasn't just Ukraine, it was Romania, it was Czechoslovakia, it was the old kingdom, it was Poland,
Hmm.
Bohemia, Transylvania, Wallachia, all those old countries, many of which, some of which are no longer on the map because once Russia swept in and took everything, um, when they finally got out from under and started sort of figuring out, you know, how to be their own individual
Hmm.
self again, a lot of older countries got I stop and carry a lightsaber. Okay, fine. Um, but it a lot of countries were lost. And borders had to be redrawn, and
Hmm.
people had to, and things were lost, and other things were found, and new things were configured. Eastern Europe didn't look the same. The Eastern
Germany
Europe.
wasn't even the same after the war.
No, no, no. But what I'm saying is so much of what had been there had to have been reconfigured, and then to have taken it out. There were so many people who, because those countries didn't have a say,
Mhm.
they didn't have a say in what was going on. You know, Khrushchev and those guys did not ask, you know, Belarus what they what they thought. They just made decisions, and everybody else, you know, went along with it because you didn't have. If you didn't want to be disappeared,
Right.
you
Again,
didn't have.
we're not going to intervene at that point.
Yeah, we didn't. It was kind of like, we're going to deal with our part of the world. You deal with your part of the world, and so long as we keep our borders clear, you don't come over here and we don't come over there. Of course, neither side totally,
Just like,
honored that, but it was still within, because we spied on them, they spied on us, but there were still rules,
mhm.
you know, that
There
there
was,
were
I
certain,
wouldn't say rules, there were gentlemen agreements
there were lines
that
where
that
both
could be
sides were unwilling.
that was flexible.
Yeah, but there were some hard lines where in this case you don't cross, in this case we don't cross. And they honored that in order to sort of like, because we'd have ruined, because I think, I'm trying to remember part of the Matthew Broderick film with Do You Want to Play a Game?
Oh, war games
War Games.
with what we call it.
Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy.
I
I
forgot
can't
the
remember who
name. The
directed
name of the military name of the computer was Walker, but I can't remember what Dr.
it.
Falk named it.
He named it
Joshua.
after his son,
Joshua. Joshua.
Joshua. Yeah, he named it after his son who had died. You know,
Now, most people don't realize they made a sequel to that movie.
didn't do as well. I don't think it
Have you
did do.
watched it?
I think I started to, got bored, and went off and did something else. I don't think I gave it.
Wow. So, yeah, okay, I would say if you can stomach it, because there were parts of that where it was just really, really, really bad, because it was like a lot of rehash of the original movie.
Hmm.
But for those who have not watched it, it was called War Games Dead Zone, or Dead Zone. And
Yeah.
what it was is that this one company created this one game that simulated affecting the world with this one virus that was supposed to destroy everything, and then your military is supposed to protect that virus and help, to help make certain that it's spread and that your forces entail, and people will actually win money in doing that. But behind the scenes it was actually just like a military computer doing this. And what we found out in the middle of it is that somebody found Dr. Faulkner transcripts and read a lot of it and came up with a
They
sister AI that was equivalent to Joshua. And it didn't know the difference between the two, just like how Joshua didn't.
yeah. It still thinks we're playing the game.
Now, here's the messed up thing about it. This sister AI doesn't listen to anything that's human.
Of course not.
So what ended up happening? The person who was the main character ended up tracking down where Joshua was at, and guess where Joshua was?
In the old Broderick place.
No,
Where was it?
in Russia.
Oh, they somehow got their hands on it.
So they brought Joshua back online, and Joshua joins the game. Joshua and his sister, I forgot what they named the sister program. They got into it, and
Just
Joshua eventually taught her that it was fruitless, that the end result is fruitless. Everybody dies.
yeah.
And
If the whole point of the game, because if I remember correctly, in the original movie, if the whole point of the game was about saving humanity and everybody dies, there's no way to win. If the end game was to come out with a winning side and both sides are equally destroyed, there's no winners. I think
well, well,
it's
you
a
you, you
simplified
keep
version of
you
how it
keep
was worked out.
murdering the line. You keep murdering the line. The lie that you try to keep saying is like the smartest move in the game is not to play,
Yeah,
because that's what he had to learn from tic tac toe, because he had to play himself. And
yeah, because
remember, his
that's how
ultimate
they
goal
defeat
was
him.
to find a way to win. But when you're in a situation where it always going to end up as a tie or there's no winner,
Yeah,
the smartest move is not to play.
yeah,
So he actually like that's one of the things that me going to school for computer science, and it's like everybody's like, well, computers going to take over. It's like, no, computers can never take over, because at the point where they become sentient enough, they become like us. They might be able to process data better, hold more data, look at things a little bit sharper, but they become pretty much like us, at least to the degree that they become like us without emotion. So we got a whole bunch of, if I could say, slightly robotic psychopaths out there by clinical definition. By
yeah,
clinical definition, not
yes.
by not by
Considering who's
crazy, not by craziness, but by clinical definition.
considering who's programming them,
Right.
you know, yeah, it is a bunch of clinical psychopaths, both traditionally and digitally, out there.
But
Do
it's
you,
just, it's just the way that it is. And it's like you would never know that until you actually start studying programming languages and getting into like actual programming of AI and trying to mimic the human brain. It's like computers could only mimic what is taught.
yeah, and if you're not taught, well, it's like children. It's like a child.
Hmm.
If you see somebody as adults and it's like, oh, there is so much you were never taught as a child. There are just basic things you weren't taught as a child, like you're not the end all and be all of creation. You have to live on this planet with other people. It isn't all just about you. You know, those are the simplest. Those are the simplest things to teach your children, and those are the things that I've seen a lot of parents fail at. And it's interesting because black parents, I think, as generations of black parents, and I'm saying this because of, if you have to look at where it stems from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Black parenting, you learn those things from your parents, your grandparents, your aunties, but you learn them in a way that tells you you're nothing. It isn't just that it ain't all about you. It's like it ain't about you at all. You don't really figure into the conversation. And it's like, and I had to learn as an adult where that comes from, to realize, okay, this is generational. Because think of where it started. And even though that situation may not still be there, it's how they learned. And because it's how they're learned, it's how they teach. Because unless something happens that disrupts that pattern, it's just going to keep propagating itself until something happens that disrupts the pattern.
My simplify sister. I'm going to have to disagree with that because I go back to military, because military, with the whole thing about basic training pretty much strips you of everything.
Yeah.
Pretty much does the exact same thing that our
Well,
parents did.
yes and no.
But
Yes and no. Because as a Marine, you it's kind of it's you are given to some degree, and the individual has to work it out, because you're given two things that are diametrically opposed. Because
mhm,
individually, your individual value is not much, but at the same time, you are expected to work as a unit, and you are expected to pull your weight and be part of the team. But it's interesting because the way we were taught, and I understand for women Marines as opposed to the men who were going through it when I went through it, because we had female DMs and they were very feminine. They were feminists. Um, there was, and then they would say, yeah, there's a bit of a dichotomy here, because on the one hand, as recruits, you're on the low end. You're on that end of the spectrum where individually you don't count, but as a unit, working together. Because the thing is you, and that's part of the thing the boot camp teaches you, is you have to, because we had a lot of women who came in who didn't understand about how to work with others. And it's interesting, when I was in kindergarten, guess one of the things they used to grade you on? How you worked and played, how well you worked and played
and
with
play with
others.
others.
And the Marines take that very seriously. Whatever they may say about recruits, and you are the lowest of the low, individually, you don't really count. You don't work well with others, you will see what it's like to be non-existent.
hmm
You
That's the reason I brought. That's the reason I brought it up, because I hate to pull Star Trek out of here, but you know the needs of the one
the
outweighs the needs of
the needs of the many, the the needs of was it the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many or the few?
or the few, right? And that's what the military tries to weed out of you.
Yeah,
They want you to value the bigger unit
yeah.
more so than anything. It's like if you was deep into faith, they were trying to weed that out of you because they wanted you to be able to work with somebody that had no faith.
Or had a
They,
different faith.
or have a different faith. They weed just about everything out of you. And if you wasn't learning, they would make your life a living hell
Oh yeah,
until you get it. until you get it. And that's the reason why military is such a brother and sisterhood, because of the simple fact that before you are able to truly join, because people think it's like, oh, I'm in basic training, I'm a part of the military. It's like, no, you're
No,
not.
you're not.
No, no. Oh, think
You
again.
are a
Basic
recruit.
training is just, a weeding out process. You could get weeded out in
In a
basic
second.
training.
You can, and because conformity,
Hmm.
and but I, like I said, we were really lucky because our DIs would say, okay, our job here is to teach you conformity, how to exist within the rules. Well, neither are you, baby. So my heart ain't broken.
No, she was talking about me. She making fun
Oh,
of me.
um, but she said, the thing is, because we had to take, believe it or not, and no, male Marines didn't have to do it as intensely as we did. We had to study military history. We did have classes on military history, and so we had to study about those individual Marines from the point in which, from our origin, when we were serving on naval ships and learning about, why captain why officers have to have the scrambled eggs on the visors of their caps and stuff. And now it's more honorary, but at the time it was
But there
necessary.
was a lot of reasoning behind a lot of different stuff. Just like when I was there, I came in the Air Force. I came in the Air Force. I spent 1 year, like I said, 1 year. I went from reserve to active duty, and then the second year I was able to get into the academy. When I finally got to the academy, the first one of the few things that they always did is they gave you this little bitty book called, we called it Contrails. It had all of this knowledge about the history that you were supposed to be able to recite at any given time, at any given point, about who did what, how they did it, all this, the major bullet points of Air Force history.
Okay.
If you had to know it.
Yeah, in boot camp, we had what was in the Marines in boot camp. They had the Marine Corps Handbook, which was a book with an olive green cover, and it was made to fit in the right hand pocket
Hmm.
of your camouflage pants.
Hmm.
We then had, when you went into the field, we had what we called the Big Red Monster, which was something about an old magazine size book,
Hmm.
thick, big, and it was all about field operations. You had to read those things cover to cover because, and our DIs, they were tough, but they were fair. And they would warn us, and they would say, there are times where you're going to be walking down from one place, whether it's sick bay, the eye doctor, something is going to happen that's going to require you to walk from wherever you've been back to the barracks on your own. In that time, unsupervised, anybody from a sergeant up can stop you and ask you a question. You have two responses. You either have to give them the answer that they desire because you know it, or you have to say, sir or ma'am, I do not know, but I will go and find out. And you would have to tell them who you were, your company and everything.
And then they'll come back and they will ask.
And they had the right to come back and ask you with 24 to 48 hours. They could come back and ask you for the answer. So, you had to be prepared because it's like you need to, it's like you have to know this. Because there were times where there were girls who, some of us were bookworms,
Hmm.
you know, and I would be sitting there making notes. Every time I had a few minutes, I'd be like writing stuff down, and the DIs would go, "Girl, do you ever do anything but read?" But every time they had a test that I had to, fill it out, I was the top. There were like maybe out of what, 33 women, maybe six of us. were the top percent
Hmm.
for those tests. Couldn't run worth the damn, but books, that was it.
The camera, you did it. The camera went out.
I knocked my camera out.
See, see, our depending on your DI, depending on how cool your DI is, because when you get into situations like that, your DI would is like those were the two options that you have. But if you chose that option, it was like, sir, ma'am, I do not know, but I will find out. If you had a cool DI, what they will always tell you is like, if you use that one, you better go find out,
Yeah, they would
and
tell
you
us.
need to, and you need to go seek that person out and tell them
We
immediately.
didn't have to seek them out. But
We
if
were told to
somebody
seek
asked
them
us
out.
the question, because they, and they, your name and stuff, you have your tag with your name on it,
Uh-huh.
and they knew everybody from sergeant up knew what companies were in training at that time. So they knew if they asked somebody a question and they didn't have the answer, they didn't even have to talk to us. All they had to do was come and grab one of our DIs. I spoke to recruit so and so, asked her such and such a question. She didn't have the answer. She said she was going to find out. Did she find out? So we would always, whenever, if somebody asked us a question, we would go, as soon as we got back inside, Sergeant Myers, Sergeant Money, Sergeant Johnson, blah, 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 blah. And they would go, do you know where to find the answer? And it's like, I think it's and you would name what information you had available to you. And sometimes and some people, just to be asses, would just ask you stuff that the only way you would know was if you had a specialty. But the thing is, in boot camp, you don't get training for your specialty. So there are sometimes they ask questions that you can't answer at all because they're unrelated to what you're being taught at that stage. They may have something to do with either we haven't been taught that yet, or this is boot camp. No one's teaching anything about sniper school. No one's teaching my occupational. I was 3531, which is 3500 was motor transport at that time.
Mhm.
3531 was truck driver.
Right.
I didn't have a license. The only time I got behind the wheel of a car before I got in the Marines, my father said he was going to teach me how to drive, and and he said, "Okay, we were in a parking lot." He says, "I want you to back the car up about 10 feet," and I had my foot on the brake. He did not say, "Don't press your," and I put the car in reverse because this was one of those cars you had to.
Hmm.
He didn't say, "Don't press your foot on the gas." He didn't say, "Just nudge it a little." He just said, "Move back 10 feet." He said, "Take your foot off the brake."
I just see that just happening. It's like you get it, like, okay, move it back 50.
It was the only time in my life I ever heard my father pray. "Oh, Father God, please, this child is going to kill me. Stop the car, stop the car." Thing is, I stopped us exactly where he wanted me to stop us.
Hmm.
He had given me a point. I saw where the point was. Stopped us right where we were supposed to. He didn't say another word. He got out of the car. He came around to the side, opened, knocked on the door, opened the car. He pulled my butt out of there so fast. He then, a couple of months later, because back then,
Hmm.
when I was a kid, you had specialized stores even on the south side. You had fish markets, you had meat markets, and you had greengrocers. You had stores like Dominic's and Jewel's that sold all of that. But like on this,
You still have like your moo and oinks, and I
well,
forgot what the
just little neighborhood
right.
markets. because Moo and Oink did not.
And you had the farmers markets that was like will sometimes take over like a bank parking lot every so often.
But what you because also certain little corner stores sold raccoons. Ha ha ha. Little corner stores which sell raccoons. And at
Mhm.
the time I was coming up in my younger years and on to my teens, you still had a generation of folks who used to go out there. That's why we have, raccoons running around neighborhoods because folks are no longer. When I was a girl, there were guys, we stayed with one babysitter before my sister was born, before my mother got pregnant with my sister, when I was about, what, 5 or 6. We lived with a lady who took care of me while my mother went to school. She worked during the day and then she went to night school to get her high school degree because
Mhm.
she left high school to have me. Um, but this woman's husband, Big John, he used to go out some nights. He hunted rabbits and he hunted squirrels. And there were some stores because, and they would sell rabbits and squirrels and raccoons because there were men who would go out at night and they would hunt rabbits and squirrels. They knew where to find them. They knew how to trap them, or
Mhm.
they didn't carry high powered rifles, but they could, there were areas where they could legally hunt rabbits and squirrels and raccoons. Because even then, you had a lot of like big open lots by power stations and stuff like that, where they knew where to find the critters and they would hunt the critters. And so many of the critters they would take home, and the rest of the critters they would
If they
take to
were
those
like a
stores.
courier or something to that magnitude, and they
And
would skin them
and
and gut them and do whatever they was going to do with them.
and they would have, you would go and the guys that sold meat would have a sign out: fresh coon or fresh squirrel, fresh rabbit. So long as there was nothing wrong with the meat, they could sell it back then.
Hmm.
And you had a lot of people. And anyway, my stepmother wanted something specifically from the fruit market, and my father didn't want to go. We were living in the Ida B. Wells Towers on Cottage
Hmm.
at that time. And without thinking, he tossed me the keys to his car. He said, run over to the fruit market and get what she wants. I got about, we were what, on the 10th floor? I got about halfway down the stairs because the elevator wasn't, you couldn't trust the elevators in the projects.
Hmm.
So you took the stairs. And so I got about down to the 5th floor before he caught up with me and grabbed the keys. It's like, no.
It's like at first he's like, okay, no big deal. That he thought about.
He thought about me backing
That's
up the
wrong.
car. He dragged me back upstairs. You just not getting no. You're not getting them grapes today. It just, it was like, and so I had no training other than that because I did not. I was in. If you took ROTC, you didn't have to take gym or driver's ed.
Driver's ed was kind of like a rite of passage when I was in high school. You always have to take that class no matter what.
If you were in ROTC, you didn't have to, because driver's ed was part of driver's ed was a part of the gym. It was part of the physical ed department back in the day. So it came under the driver's training came under physical education.
That was weird. They must have changed that
They
because
made change, and I think that's one of the reasons they made changes, because there were those of us who were in ROTC who didn't do driver's ed. I
yeah,
didn't take driver's ed.
yeah, you didn't take driver's ed, but then again, I was one of the few people that qualified as an army marksman in my sophomore year.
I I in ROTC, we had a little, and we had a firing range.
Mm-hmm.
for those who never took ROTC, back in the day, ROTC had a basement area, and in that basement area,
See,
they
ours was
kept.
not in the basement. Ours was
Uh,
not in the basement.
we were in the basement, and we were sitting there with our guns, and they didn't teach us gun safety. So those of us who never went hunting, you know, a lot of the guys knew it because depending on their ages, they had daddies or grandpas or uncles who went and hunted squirrels and raccoons and whatnot. So they would take them with them. I knew a lot about fishing because my stepfather used to take me fishing. So I knew about how to gut and scale a fish, but I didn't know anything about guns and gun safety. So, and these were just BB guns. They weren't guns. They were like BB guns.
We had the real thing. We had 22s.
This
We
was the
had to go through. We had to go through the training.
this was the south side of Chicago, directly across the street from the Robert Taylors. They were not going to let us have anything with live ammo there.
I think what was it? Is it Phillips? Phillips is on 63rd.
Phillips High School is on, what is it, 37th.
They had a full range where I competed at, and we shot
Okay.
live 22 rounds.
DuSable, we had something akin to like a pellet gun.
No,
And
they replaced our 22s with pellet guns my senior year, but for my sophomore and my junior year, we shot 22 caliber rifles, live ammo, and this is at High Park. We went to
that
competitions and shot live 22 ammo for
I
my
was,
sophomore and junior year of high school. So it really depends on the high school.
and
So
where you're located, what's around you. Because understand, right across the street at the back on State Street, across from DuSable, is what they used to call the Staters, the Robert Taylor homes.
mhm.
4848 was one of the most notorious of those. My family, my father's side of the family, helped make it that way, which is why when the little thug wannabes were picking on me my freshman year, and I told my father about it, my uncle Wesley, I think it was Wesley and Sam, showed up one day. And after that, all the little thug wannabes got out of my way. It was like, and I don't know exactly what it said, but I know from the reactions of a couple of those boys, some serious physical threat was made. So, but I was standing there with my little pellet gun, and like I said, I wasn't. He had just he armed us. We were loaded, and I didn't know anything about safeties on the gun,
Oh no,
and
no.
my safety was off, and I'm just standing there, and my finger, I was shifting, and I hit the trigger. Luckily, my weapon was pointed at where
Downrange.
at down range, so I didn't hit anybody. But after that, that man came up, grabbed my weapon, kicked me out of the room.
Yep.
And he said, "You will not be down here for the rest of the year." It
Hmm.
was like, okay. And when I went to Austin, I guess he sent the note that followed me
Hmm.
because the following year it was like, "Oh no, Haygood, you're not going on the range."
Nope.
It was like, okay. So I could march, I could do drum and bugle corps, but
Just be, just be happy it wasn't during basic.
no, I would by then, because they explained it to us. Because I think sometimes in ROTC especially, these guys forget these aren't soldiers that they're talking to. And I get why ROTC was originally formed and what the original purpose of it was, just like the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. We consider some of the original things they did. But these guys, a lot of these older guys, didn't take in the point of we weren't full-time military. We would
What?
show up for maybe an hour out of our day to take ROTC. And the rest of our day, we were just kids. And you had to talk. It wasn't enough to just say, do. Explain why. And a lot of times, they, they failed to do that. It was just do this. And you go, why? Because I said so. Why? Why are you asking? Because I have the right. You want me to perform this duty? Why does this duty need to be done in this particular way? Wasn't said I wasn't going to do it. I just wanted to know why. I was a troublemaker.
Yeah, you was a troublemaker. I'm just
I
up here
was
thinking. I'm
a,
just up here thinking. It's like, the actual retired master sergeants that we have for our ROTC would have looked at you and been like, "You won't make it. You wouldn't make it. You already started too much. You wouldn't make it."
I just, but you know what? When you're 14 years old, give a it. For, don't forget that these are not soldiers. These are not recruits. We're not full time. And I got learning to march, learning to do your facing movements, staying in sync with everybody. I got that, especially because we had those competitions, you know. So I got that. A lot of we were lucky. The guy who was our student lieutenant colonel would go, "We're doing this because," and it's like, was that so hard? Why?
Well,
What's because when you're 14, at least when I was 14, and the only reason I took ROTC is because I hated gym class. I hated gym class with a mad passion. The girl tried to drown me in the swimming portion. After that, it was like, okay, I'm done with gym class. But, you know, but there were certain things, and like I said, you're giving kids, I don't care if it's a BB gun. If they've never held it before, this is how you hold your weapon. Make sure that the safety is on. Simple things. When I went into boot camp, simple things. They explained it. This is how you hold that weapon when you're not actively firing. Make sure that the safety is on. We didn't even get to touch a weapon until we spent a couple of days just in classes, learning what to do and what not to do. And I actually went to the inspector and said, you know what? I wish they had taught us this in ROTC because this would have made a lot more. And it's like it does not make. And some of these guys, it was just they were like, do as I say. It's like fine, but this is something that if not handled, and I made a mistake. If somebody had said, make sure that the safety is on, because I was given this that way. I didn't know how to check the safety on a weapon. So, it was just handed to me. What am I
like
supposed to do? Hold it.
I'm just saying it's a blessing that it was a BB
It's a
as opposed
blessing
to
that it was a BB.
as opposed to what we had. As
It was
opposed
a
to what we had
blessing that I had it pointed down
down
range,
range. Hmm.
because if I had turned to face anybody at the point at which it went off, BB or not, I could have hurt somebody there. So to hand somebody something and not give a basic explanation of, hey, make sure the safety of this is the safety, make sure it's in this position so you don't hurt anybody. 5 seconds. Doesn't hurt anything with the chain of command. And in my opinion, it would have made me more efficient because I would have understood it better.
It's to me, it's still poor instruction. No matter what it is, it was still poor instruction. And I'm not going to excuse, I'm not going to excuse poor instruction for poor instruction. That really is what it
It's
is.
important, when you're not explaining it. That was one thing I was really grateful for in the Marines. We didn't get why everything, but at least you understood what you were you understood what you were doing.
I
And
also
you had it, our DIs would go, because we'd go on a 10-mile run and come back and feel and the DIs would go, yeah, it hurts. Yeah, you feel like you're dying. But on a battlefield, you would be grateful that you're in shape and you can make that run and you can survive. If we were to be attacked, you need to be in utmost shape, especially if somebody you're with is wounded, and now you not only have to get yourself out, but you may have
you
to
have to
get them
get
out
them
too.
out.
You need to be in shape. To me, that's like, okay, I understand that. I get it. I've got to be in tip top condition because this is not just every day on the street. This is, I can end up in a battlefield. And and I'd say on the battlefield, nobody cares if you're tired. Nobody cares if you're winded. Bullets don't care. It's like, well, yeah, I
Oh,
learned that
but
growing up
yeah,
in projects.
bullets is like, oh yeah, I'm not meant for you. I'm meant for the guy next to you. It's like, no, bullets don't do that. Bullets don't do that. It's like,
Oh, are you winded? Are you winded, precious? Okay, I'll go beat up somebody else. No, but at least, you know, you have an understanding. They make it very clear what's expected of you, and that you have, um how do I want to put this, you've been explained enough so that you can fulfill your duty to the
mhm.
best of your ability, because you have to have some understanding of what you're doing. I didn't I was the only person in my driver's school who had never driven before.
But
So
that could be a good or a bad thing. That could be a good or a bad thing because you're just that lumpy bit of clay. Either you're going to be ready to be molded into what you need it to be, or they're going to have to work everything out for you to at least do your basic duty here.
but and it was interesting because commercial school was fine. I had fun in commercial driving because in the Marines we have two schools. We have two sides of the base. There's a commercial side to the base, and that's where all the olive green vehicles and stuff. That's mostly the administrative side of the base. And then there's tactical side of the base. That's where all the combat units are. The commercial side, you're an officer because certain over at Camp Lejeune,
Mhm.
there were certain taxis. They could drop you off at the gate. They could pick you up at the gate, but they couldn't come on to the base. You have to have special tags at Lejeune that would let you. And I'm sure Great Lakes, just about every base has it. There, you can,
Yeah,
for certain taxes,
because Academy had it too.
you had,
National Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs had it too.
and
There's certain calf that could come in. There's certain calf that couldn't.
and the ones, and there were those that could come in, but the only thing they could do is drop you off at that guard station, turn around, and go back out. That was about the most. You had a small group that were allowed to come onto the base, and usually because they were picking up high-ranking officers or dignitaries, and they were limo services or something, like hired cars.
Hmm.
But so what we had was called the base taxi, and the commercial unit, that was our job. We were base taxi. So an officer coming in from Bodunk or whatever, he you know graduated OCS and got to the base late at night, need to go to the off, the bachelor, the BOS. They would show up at the gate because that's as far as the taxis could take them,
Hmm.
especially at night. You couldn't. any taxi coming to the base at night was not allowed in the gate. They would dump you at the gate, turn around and go, But then it was like the call would come for base taxi. And I remember working base taxi my first drive, you know. I had a friend who worked with me. I was so grateful she was with me because at one point she goes, we're just driving down the middle of the road, that dotted line. You're supposed to be on one or the other side of it. I was it's 2 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, y'all got to go to the gate and pick up, I think of some lieutenant, some boot Louie that we had, your little yellow bar puppy we had to pick up and take to the bachelor office. And I didn't know what the BOQ was. So I'm calling.
Oh my. I could just imagine when you had FDO duty. I could just imagine anything and everything that could have happened. You would have been like, "What is that acronym again?"
I was so happy when I actually preferred working in the motor pool. I didn't enjoy driving until I got to truck company and was assigned, and I was going to school and learning how to drive trucks. That was fun. But I felt like they had put me in the wrong thing because I had the most fun in the motor pool. And because
Lane would have been a gearhead. If they would have left her alone, you would have became a gearhead.
The reason I got picked for being a driver is I was a woman, and they didn't have a lot of women. Back at that time, women, you could be a driver, but you couldn't be a mechanic, because if you were a mechanic, you could get put into a tactical units. And the question was, with tactical units and for the Marines, we were the first after Korea, we were the first group of WMs in boot camp to go in the rifle range, and then to go to IDS, IDC, individual combat, ICB, ICT, individual combat training. So we were the first group in a long time to go out in the field and do, set up bivouacs. And I love throwing grenades. That's so much fun. I had so much fun when I had guard
3.
And it was so funny because they were like, okay, you're going to touch your hand. We're going to give it. You're going to hold it like this. And you're going to put this hand, you're going to pull. And it was like a Monty Python. It was straight out of like Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Like, if you don't hold that trigger, it's not
on
us. It's not on us. Well, it's like, you have to hold that trigger, because if you don't, your count is going to be way shorter.
Our instructor, he was so funny because just with anything we did, whether you had swimming, whether you were at ICT, whether you were in the rifle range, you didn't just go there. You had 1 or more days of pre-instruction, because they wanted to make sure that if once you were on that range, you knew how to do what you were supposed to do and carry out your orders, not stand there looking stupid. Especially since you had NBC, ABC, CBS, and a whole bunch of governors.
Okay. Yeah, because you was on television. Okay, that makes sense.
They were stalking the hell out of us because we were the first. And however, they wanted to make sure we could do it. So we had to sit in classes, and we had done. They got us up at 0300, 0330, we set out. We had to march to our bivouac. We had just enough time by the time we got there to put our packs down and then go to our first class of the day, which was hand grenades.
No breakfast, no nothing. It's like, okay, wake up, March, drop
Course
the pack.
march.
Kind
Hump
of
them
was. It's like I'm
Allisons.
sleepy. I'm barely conscious. You got. It's like I can't learn nothing like this.
Our drill instructors were cool because it's like, ladies, today we're all lesbians because we're gonna hump Alice till we get there. It's like, okay. But so we had to do our march and we dropped our stuff off, and then we had to go sit in the class and learn about hand grenades and other pyrotechnics. But we had a great instructor because he realized that we would be half asleep.
Mhm.
So he gets up and he takes out, and we don't get that this is a training grenade.
He scared the shit out of you.
He takes
He's
his
like,
hand
okay,
grenade.
think. He's like, think. Okay, we're about to tell you about grenade. Oh, he pulled the pin. He about to blow something.
We're all sitting there in a half circle. He drops it down in the middle of us. And then he goes and starts giving, his lecture. And we're like, and it's going, and he's just walking back and forth and talking like, and all of a sudden, boom! You never saw 120 women just lose it. Because we all knew we were dead. We all just knew we were dead. And once he quit laughing, he turned to Sergeant Money and goes, "They're a lot more fun than a bunch of male Marines." And he was like, "Oh, great. Scaring the crap out of us is more fun."
See, we would have got yelled at. We would have got yelled at. That's like, how come nobody dived on it? You're supposed to save your buddy. You're supposed to save your buddy. You're not
No,
supposed to be sitting there panicking.
we were told, sit in this position, do not move. And all of our DIs were ex-military police. And Sergeant Monty, who is actually, an inch and a half shorter than me, the tallest girl was 6 feet. First day, Sergeant Monty flipped her on her face and then sat on her. It was like, ain't an ass in here I can't whoop. We're like, yes, ma'am. Whatever you say. Ours is not to question why. Ours is just to do or get our butts kicked. So when they said, sit down, we sat. Stay quiet. Okay.
So you never had the constant training of what if you was in the middle of a battlefield and somebody tossed a grenade into your barrack or tent or current immediate surroundings.
He he got to that once we quit.
Now I'm enjoying this joke even more. Now I'm enjoying this joke even more because that was kind of like our day one when we got to the field.
He was like,
And it's
okay,
like,
if this had been a live grenade, you'd all be dead now. Or, at least those of you in the back, once you regained your hearing and had most of your fingers and toes, you'd be too busy trying to figure out what all the pieces of of the women of the front were. Um, but we were given orders. And at that point it was okay. But people were like trying, because we're paying attention, but at the same time women are like, we're like trying to point, and he's just like he's just doing his thing like it was no big deal. So we didn't, it's like you don't get, and it was like he was just having fun. But unfortunately, the guy who gave us our swimming instruction, well, no, not the swimming instructor. The next day, we had the guy came in the next day.
uh,
He was tall and good looking. and he had this really sexy Southern accent. And, we're not supposed to look anybody in the eye. So we were looking elsewhere. And, one woman's looking elsewhere and she nudges the next and was like, check that out. And at one point, he stops and he goes, y'all are really an attentive bunch. Wow, I'm flattered. Then he followed everybody's eye line. He realized where we were looking. Oh, you never seen a man turn so red. I thought you ever see those cartoons where the thermometers get red and then they burst?
Yeah.
That's what we thought was going to happen.
So like
our DIs made us get up and go run 3 miles as punishment for that, for embarrassing.
But you wasn't looking at him.
No, we weren't looking him in the eye.
Right, but again, that's with part of your training.
We were told you're not, as a recruit, you're not supposed to be looking someone in the eye.
Are you staring me down, soldier?
So
I know that very well. It's like, no, ma'am, no,
but
sir. I'm not staring you down.
You have a bunch of women who, at this point, we've been in there about 2 months, just almost 2 months. And,
and y'all all becoming like Possum Pearl. Oh, man.
And like I said, one person nudges another and she goes, about the middle. Just look at it. And the next thing you got a bunch of, and we weren't like, oh, baby. I'm just sitting there, very rapt attention, very quiet, very respectful.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, whoa, oh man. It was just, we were just, he just realized that we weren't looking at his face. So the DIs made us get up and go run for 3 miles. So it was funny because they then, later that night, we heard them cracking up in their tent. We had fun because we pissed off all the men. Did you go through the thing where you at night you have to weave your way? There's you have to go over and under the wires and not set off the grenades.
We did that during the daytime, but
no.
We did it during specialized drills, but we didn't have to do it in nighttime.
No, Marines, they make you do it at night. And they gave us the instructions. They suggested and a couple of the girls were smart. They had nail polish. So the girls in front would find the wire, whip out some nail polish, snippy, go. So that all the women behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were company A and B. We were 3B. Company A, they didn't do as well. They set off quite a few. We took a little longer,
mm-hmm.
but we made it all the way through without setting off we didn't trip a single wire. And it was the spookiest thing though, because it's dark. There's only a little moonlight. So you have to, you're trying, and they're saying you have to do this, because you don't know where the wires are. So you're doing that. And Sergeant Myers, who was from Boston.
From Boston.
Yes, very, potty hottie. And I don't know how the hell she got up that tree. But because I'm doing it and I'm coming to the end. And she said, okay, hey, good, you're done. And I'm like, and she goes, I could have shot you 6 times by now. Hey, good, move. And I still didn't know where she was. And we were all like, where is she? She was up in the tree somewhere,
mm-hmm.
watching us. It was like, damn, she's like a ghost. she earned our respect. Nobody, we didn't love Sergeant Myers, but Sergeant Myers, she had been an MP, military police, and I guess she had gotten to some fisticuffs with some drunken sailors from where she was sent. So she didn't take nothing, you know, she didn't take nothing. But she was just, we were like, and we were like, ma'am, where were you? She goes, I was there. Yes, ma'am. We are asking where the sergeant was. I was there. Telling nobody where she was. It's like, she was like, yeah, she says, you know why? I'm not telling you where it was, because if this was a situation of war and you were the enemy,
You did.
you not knowing where I was, you were dead.
You were
And
dead.
I survived. She said, and that's the end of it. It's like, yes, ma'am. But yes, today on the boot camp show,
Yeah, I mean
I
that
just
that's the thing
realized,
that I was like, I was like, I guess not going to tell any of my stories because that's one of the things. That's one of the things because it's like one of the things that I hated in basic is when they saw my cross for my marksman badge. I got made fun of because I felt sidearm
we
because
never
I
got to,
never truly shot a handgun.
they didn't let us do sidearm. We did the M16
Yep,
because that was it back then.
we had to do the M16. They made us do the Beretta.
And we didn't get to do sidearms because the congressmen and senators didn't want to see us holding sidearms. But, and to have my, because when you're shooting, I don't know what they do in the Air Force, but in the Marines, when you're on the range, you have a book. And there are two books. There's the book that you have, and you have, because every shot you take, you have to, in that book, put down, did you miss that shot or did you make that shot? And, and I made 8 out of 10 shots. But they
At
had to,
what range? No, at what range? Because the way that they made us do it is that we have to shoot at different yardage.
whatever the yardage was for the rifle range that we were on.
So
We were on the same
you
range
didn't have
the
three sets of
no, we
targets that
had
you had. Okay, all right. So yours
um
was a little bit different. Yours was a little
we
bit different.
outscored, there was a platoon of men. There were a company of men who were going through at the same time we were. Um, and we outperformed them we outperformed them all across the board. And we found out about it later. Our DIs were cracking up. They got a call and were told by the major that we had made the men look really bad. Because we outperformed them in everything from cleanliness of our bivouac area to the amount of women who were capable in the rifle range. Most of us had pretty much, like I said, when they let me toss the grenade, orgasm. It's like,
After being scared shitless, now it's like, oh.
well, part of it, our bivouac area was, I think we were about 2 miles away from the grenade range. So, and I was on, I was on latrine duty. So me and a couple of other recruits were like scrubbing toilets.
Mhm.
But we were close enough where you could feel the explosions. You couldn't just hear them, you could also feel that boom, boom. And it was like, I so hope nobody's got a launcher.
Nobody got rocket propel. You just got regular just throwing.
Just throwing, because a couple of them were real loud, you know, And so when we got through with our job and we're sent with the next group to throw, it was toward the end of the day. So I only got to throw once. And I was like, please, can I, please, please, that was so much fun. Did you see? Boom, that was so great. And they were like, oh, you definitely don't deserve a green.
They were like, "Hey, good, go to the back of the line." But I want to go to the back of the line.
No, they didn't even let me. It's like, no, go stand up. You got your throat. Go stand over there. Go. Just, please. What did I tell you? Yes, ma'am. Go stand there. It was like, I can't. I was like with the baby Sinclair on the deck. I can't.
Again.
I was just, because it was, you, they give it to you, pull, and shit blows up. I was like, there's nothing better than that, you know. And when I was in driver training, I got to my most fun job was we had the MPs had these step vans, kind of similar to the old vans that the post office and UPS used to have, where
Yeah.
they were open on one side and they had the metal floor and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We had to school wasn't we had a couple of weeks to go before our school started for that training cycle, and so we had to work in the garage and other places. And they were like, have you ever worked on putting a vehicle together? And it's like, no. I said, you're going to learn how to repair a step van. So I had to learn how to do things like air rivet a floor, put in a steering column. I had
See, like I said, you would have been a gearhead if they would have left you in motor pool.
Oh, it was so much fun. But at that time, and I said, well, why can't I do this? Can I ask for? And they said, well, they could have changed my MOS so that I could have gone in to mechanic and engineering, but that would have made me
have to go to the theater of battle if called.
And so because at that time when I first went in, women were not allowed to come into combat units, tactical units. And our unit, there were 3 women in our tactical unit. We were all in the same room when we got transferred to tactical. There were only 3 women in our unit, and we were, like I said, we were all in the same room. And because and the major had to explain, we were a combat unit, so we could at any time get called to get up and go, because we were mobile transport. We're the ones who drive everybody around. But I was like, I would like to be on the motor pool because I like taking stuff apart and putting it back together. He looked at me like I was just, she's insane.
No, it's like being in the Air Force and working around a lot of officers. I could just imagine, and it's like they just was like, that's a simple one right there. She'll be easy. She'll be easy to please as long as you just give her something simple to do. She'll be happy.
I hated typing, so where do they stick me? I get sent to a combat unit. In the office, you look good in a skirt. Put on your highest, regulation heels and your shortest regulation skirt and some makeup and come downstairs and type. Sir, I only type 25 words a minute. That'll do. They didn't have me typing because they needed a typist. Well, they did, but it was, it's like put your makeup on, get your hair done. It was more of the look factor, which to me was kind of stupid.
Again, it was the day and age and everything here.
I missed being on. I missed being out there in the motor pool, and I was lucky. I had guys around me who were some decent dudes. So the first time I had to change the tire on a 5-ton, and they gave me, lug wrench. I had no idea, tire wrench. I had no idea what to do. And one of the guys I knew came and said, "Hey, climb up here, put it there, jump down on it, it'll spin." Because those things are really tight, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And my
And they
gunneries,
looked at they probably looked at your size and up there. It's like, yeah, you're about the right weight. Just jump on it and spin.
but but my gunny just said, "Well, just take the lug nuts off there and change the tire." I got it up on the I got it lifted in the right position, but I didn't know anything about getting. I'd
The
never
lug
done that before.
off of there. You're just like, what's this? What this thing is supposed to do? How is it supposed to? How is this thing supposed to get this
No,
thing?
I'm and I can't get it to budge. And of
Uh-huh.
course, Gunny and them are sitting in the office just laughing their asses off.
Right, because again, those things when they put them on, they use a particular pneumatic drill to make sure that they're tight. So to get them off,
So they don't come off in the middle, if you get shot at.
uh-huh.
Um, but so, to have one of the guys I knew who were like, "Hey, good, let me show you how to do this." Because obviously they're just laughing their asses out. So let
Uh-huh.
me show you how to do it. And it was nice to have guys. I used to
Uh-huh.
love it because occasionally I would work on the big rigs.
Uh-huh.
And I would love it if it, like, every once in a while we would get like you would get like a quick rain shower. And I love that because those things were so tall. I would just climb up, I would climb under the fender
Uh-huh.
and just lay on top of the wheel. It was a great place to take a nap while it was raining because I could just lay on the wheel.
They're like, hey, good, what you doing up under there? I'm checking the suspension, sir.
It would usually be because it would be in the middle of the rainstorm, and most people would have gone seeking shelter. It's like, where's Haygood? Has anybody seen Haygood? Oh my God, we lost the only woman.
It's like, but then when they find you up under the wheel well, it's like, what you doing up under there? I'm checking the suspension, sir. I'll be out in a minute.
It's like
And then you
it's
go right back to sleep.
it's dry and warm. I've got protection. I'm not.
Uh-huh.
But I loved it because my job a lot of times was um, I don't know if you've ever worked a deuce and a half or a 5-ton truck.
Uh-uh.
The batteries are, instead of it's two 12-volt batteries hooked together in sequence.
Okay.
So and on the trucks, the batteries, they're not inside the engine. They're outside. There's an area where you open it up and there's the battery.
Like a particular access box for it.
You have to pull out the housing. You have to pull the battery out. You then have to take the battery apart. You have to clean all the connectors. You have to check and make sure it still has a charge. And then you have to put it all back together, put it back in its housing, and put it back in the truck. I used to love that because those things, I never had to go to the gym when I was in the Marines because those things were 50 pounds. 2.5 tons for
About
50
almost
pounds.
as tall as you, about 50 pounds.
No, they're about,
Yeah, like I
yeah.
said, almost as tall as you, about half your size.
It's like, yeah, I used to love it because there'd always be some stupid little boot Louie who would come by. What you doing, hey good? Working. What you working? I'm checking the battery. How do you do that? Sir, I need a rubber wrench. Can you go in there and ask Gunny for a rubber wrench, please? Send him off. There's no such, for those watching, there's no such thing as a
There's
rubber
a
wrench.
rubber wrench. And Gunny would probably be like, sir, I believe he was just bothering the mechanic, let them do their job.
You know, Haygood is the only woman, the only able-bodied woman out there right now slinging that 50. It's like, sir, that battery pack is 50 pounds. What is she working on? Deuce and a half, that's 50. 5-ton, bigger, that's 75. She can sling that on her own without assistance. Take it out, take it apart, put it back together, put it in, and make sure it works. We need to make sure that she can function. So you sexually harassing, our PFC, not a good idea. Because what if she's upset and she doesn't check that correctly and that thing blows up? Because I asked once, it's like, what happens if I don't do this right? Goes, oh, maybe somebody's on their way to over to what was that place? Cherry Point, I think it's called.
Oh, the funeral home.
No, Cherry Creek. There was Lejeune, I think there was Lejeune, Cherry Creek, and then there was, I think, another place. There were a couple of bases
Hmm.
that we used to run to and from. But we had to make sure everything, because also this is North Carolina.
Hmm.
The heat is hot. I didn't know what hot was. And I had a staff sergeant who
So you
one
never took
day,
training in Arizona then?
no, I didn't go to
That's
29
hot.
Palms. I had an uncle who went to 29 Palms, and Ricky and I were talking about it. He says, he said, as hot as it was in North Carolina, 29 Palms is hotter. And he told me one day his sergeant told him, oh, if you think this is hot, go to Africa. You ain't that hot till you've gone Africa or Middle East hot. This feels like air conditioning compared to that. It's like, well, no, this is about as hot as I want to get. But because of the heat,
Hmm.
you you had to service those batteries because they had to keep a water level
Right.
within the battery. If that water dissipates, battery too much acid, not enough water to,
Boom.
yeah, battery go boom, truck go boom. And if you're in the middle of civilian traffic, you might as well have set off a mini nuke
Hmm.
or a dirty bomb. Um, so, because I was like, why do we all, because they would go like, okay, those 30 trucks, I need you to get those 30 trucks done before the end of the day. It's like, why? It goes, because they have to go out, because the day after tomorrow, they have to go out and you have to make sure that there's enough water and everything's in working order. And I was lucky. Once you were out of boot camp, you could ask why in certain situations because it's
Hmm.
like, I'm gonna do the job. I'm just curious as to,
No, no, it's not. It's not like a why ass when you're complaining. It's more like, okay, why as far as the circumstances, like why so soon?
it's like,
Like
why?
why can't I take the normal time to do
No,
X, Y, and Z?
it's like you're good, you're fast, you can get it. You can get this done.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, great, thank you. Let me start on this. And when I first started, it was hard because these are like 50-pound packs, and it's like, and I had one guy who was nice enough to show me how to do it.
Hmm.
But once they show you how to do it and then you do it and they see you can do it well enough on your own, nobody's going to come help you sling that. I don't care how heavy it is. If there's a 75-pound tire and it has to get changed, once they show you how to change that tire, you're on your own. And and I got it because he was like, no, no offense, but if every time you need to perform a function, I have to pull somebody else off a job to help you do it, that
And what good
slows,
are you?
yeah, that slows down our efficiency. And so either you can pull your weight and do the job or you can't. And so it was like, and I remember I wrote my mom, and it's like there is a certain amount of pride at the end of the day where I'm tired and I hurt, but I know that I held my own. I did the job that was assigned and I did the job well. Anybody coming after me to check, because when I first started doing that particular function, every once in a while the gunny would come out. I'd be 5 trucks down and he'd be checking to make sure that I painted the interior, because we also had, you couldn't just work on the battery. You also had they had a specific type of paint that had to
Hmm.
go on the interior that
Hmm.
would wear out after a while, and you would have to replace it because it would also regulate the temperature of the battery. You know, so and I loved it because it was all these complex things that
So
made these
Gunny
things
left
fun.
once Gunny left you alone. You know you was good. You were straight.
Yeah, just tell me what I have to do, what needs to be done, and show me. Show me once, let me do it, show you I understand. Hello. I mean, it's heavy. Okay, let's go have to take it. But after your first couple of weeks, it just gets to where, boom, do 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 do, you take your kit.
Slide, lock, and like you truck it to the next one. Like okay.
Yeah, and so long as I was, and it was like every once in a while, somebody might stop. Hey, get you okay? You need a soda or whatever? No, I'm okay. I'm on it. Or hey, do you need a soda? I'm going over. I'm going over. I'm going over to the little canteen. Do you need a soda or something? Yes, please bring me back a cup. You know, it was. You didn't have a lot of big conversations. You were
No,
supposed.
it was never like that when you were working. But my experience, because I worked with a lot more officers, it was never really about talking. It was more about, okay, this is what we need for you to do. Go do it, and you just focus on doing it.
Yeah, and the guys I worked with, the everyday guys, my rank and above, were pretty much like, she's doing her job. Go over there, make sure that she doesn't, that she need a soda, water, or something. Make sure she don't get heat stroke, heat exhaust. And there was the one good thing about June was we had flag days.
Hmm.
So a green flag meant you could do any job. Yellow flag, there were certain jobs you couldn't do because it was too hot. My job was you can work on the batteries, but instead of getting this many done, you only get this many done. Or they would find some other easier job for me to do because the heat exhaust and heat stroke was a thing. I didn't learn that till I
So
got
instead of
there.
doing batteries that day, you just might change tires.
Yeah, or it's like, oh, you're just gonna, sometimes it was like, hey, guess what, this jeep, this guy flipped the jeep. We had this one driver, whenever he went to there was this area, he would always make this curve and he would flip a jeep. That place where
Or
they
I could just imagine the top of that Jeep.
the gas mask area. I think it, and back then we didn't know what trauma. They didn't, unless you'd been on the battlefield, they didn't talk about traumatic events.
Uh-huh.
And I think when he went in the gas chamber in boot camp, it was traumatic enough so that every time he had to make that curve around where the gas chamber was, he'd freak, go to, because back then Jeeps, you couldn't turn a Jeep, especially you had to do a 90-degree turn,
Hmm.
faster than 20 miles an hour. If you were on a regular road, there at Lejeune there were rules. Certain turns were not to be made above certain speeds depending on what you were driving. Because Jeeps back then, Jeeps would flip.
Hmm.
And I think it was just something about that corner where the gas chamber was. Just he would freak him.
So it just makes me wonder, because was it really something about the mustard gas and everything that freaked them out, or was it the fact that for you to pass that course, they ripped your mask off and you had to be a part of it? You had to be in there to
I
suffer.
I never went in the gas chamber.
Oh,
I never went.
you never went through NBC.
No, We didn't go to the, we never, because our, because we were the first unit to go to ICT,
Hmm.
the time that we would have, the day that we would have been assigned to do that, we were in the field.
Okay.
So, and then they just didn't reschedule it because by the time we got back, the guys from Officers Training School, the OTS guys were in there. And they weren't, you know, they weren't going to make the little officers wait an extra hour so that they could put us in and out.
Mhm.
And so we didn't get to do it.
Trust me, you didn't miss anything special because most of the day you was in a mask most of the day. You know, you was trained. It's like, you know, this, that, yada, 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 yada. They showed you all the different things, why the mask is so
We did all the
important,
pre-training.
how to you know change all the filters and everything, do all this other stuff. But the last part of that training is that you have to walk through the full length of that chamber, and they had like the lights and stuff out, and the whole thing about it is that they made certain that you had your mask on. But the thing about it is, they made you loosen it up where at any given time, one of the BIs could come and just,
Rip it off. We did all the
and you had to
pre-class.
walk the rest of the length of it and come out and recover. If
We
you can't, you
did.
could. The whole thing is, if you passed out while you was in there, you failed.
Yeah. We did all the pre-training.
Mhm.
We did that while we were in ICT. But because we had
You didn't
all
get to
the,
walk the chamber. You didn't have to walk the chamber. That's all.
yeah, it was, you know, and when we got back, because we were on the range and all of that, and they had a schedule. You only had so much time, and because we were the first, and then our, some of the time we spent was increased because we had. I remember after our first class, they finally let us eat,
Mhm.
and I got in trouble.
How well do you get in trouble eating? How do you get in trouble eating?
We
Explain.
okay. We get our food, you know, our little boxes.
Mhm.
I'm trying to eat. I am tired. I am in pain. I am hungry. And this asshole with a camera is in my face.
Oh no! You been again. I keep forgetting. You have to deal with the media, and the media was there. It's like, how's the food? You know, like
And I'm like,
you're
what
ready
do
to be
you,
like, pow, get out my
I'm
face.
like, what do you need? I'm just go ahead. And it's like, I'm trying to eat. I think at the point that I stood up
Uh-huh.
and Sergeant Monty saw that I had shifted my weight and I was advancing on him,
Mhm.
she got between us. She was like, you need to go. They said, you need to go. You did. And he was like, what? He goes, did you not see what you just did? And he goes, I don't get it. He goes, did you not see how she shifted her body? How she shifted her weight? She was ready to kill you. She's trying to let her eat. just let her sit over here and eat. Cause she was, you know, cause he, I mean, just right. I'm sitting right here. The camera is right there. I'm like, I'm trying to eat. You know, I'm trying. And I had never used a John Wayne before. So I'm like,
Really?
yeah, we didn't get to use, they had given them, they were, you know, it's part of your, when you get your Alice, it's part of your kit.
All right.
And they explained how to do it. So I knew how to do it. But, you know, you're sitting there and
Yeah, cranking array.
you're cranking away, and this guy's just all up.
It's like, look at that kid. I'm about to take a picture. Look, and like the camera, everything is right there on your face. It's like,
And I'm trying to eat, you know, and especially since we had 15 minutes.
mm-hmm.
We had 15, we had the little K ration box, and we had 15 minutes to eat, which meant we had no time to heat up any of our food.
wait. So okay. I'm just trying to think. So you didn't get the full MRE. You only got the can portions from it.
We got the canned portions and something to drink. And they were like, okay, this thing and this, the thing that's you like that, you put it on top, you put your can on top to heat it up,
Hmm.
toss that away. We're not using it. You don't have time for that.
Dang. Oh. Oh my goodness.
So we ate, but you weren't heating anything up. So I was already like, I gotta eat this. I can't cook it. Can't heat it up.
It's nothing worse. Well, at least hopefully they gave you something to drink. Because I know eating cold, chicken and rice, it was never fun from an MRE.
I think my first day
Even though it's
breakfast.
delicious, it's still delicious. Don't get me wrong, but it's
No,
cold. But cold is not. It's not. It's like
it's
you need to put a little bit of water from their canteen and heat it up just a little bit, just to get it just right.
we had a can. I had a canteen of water. I had my cold ass meal, and I had a man in my face
And with a man in the face with a camera.
with a camera. And I was in my head, and she also realized I had adjusted the way I was holding my John Wayne.
Yep.
Because one of the things our drill instructors, like I said, they were all XMPs.
Hmm.
So before we left for the field, they were explaining to John Wayne. And ladies, if don't once we give you this John Wayne, don't lose it, because if you're ever in a situation where you need to defend yourself or just get somebody out your way, this
It's a
is how
weapon.
you use it.
Hmm.
So I flipped it to where I went into attack mode. Because it's like I'm sitting there looking at him, trying to figure, okay, where can I start peeling off his skin where it's not going to bleed as much.
Hmm.
So I can give him some of his skin back and say, I can eat this or feed it to you. Because it was like I got 15 minutes. I've got
By the time
15.
you got through doing all of that, your 15 minutes probably would have been up. So that's the reason why she stepped in. Because as soon as like you said, as soon as she shifted, it's like, oh, there goes her 15 minutes. I need to do it now, but she at least gets something to eat.
She's going to, because she's going to the bridge. If I don't get in the way between her and and I'm sure if there had not been congressmen and senators and other hoity-toities there, and this idiot had been there with a camera, I could have heard him and gotten away with it. But
Just like the dude that got your way that you put on his. Yeah, it's like I told him that he was not supposed to be in this area.
hey,
And I follow regulations such and such, such and such. I
you
did my job. Don't shoot me.
my M16, my Bunky's M16. They were chained to the ends of our bunks. All of us had to chain our rifles to the end of our bunks.
Hmm.
And I was on guard duty. And we were given specific instructions. And it was nice. I started citing the reasons for, the instances in which deadly force is allowed. He didn't get the hint. You know, it's like, I can't guarantee that that weapon is not loaded.
I could just imagine that dude. It's like this little old lady is not this little lady right here not going to do too much stuff to me. This, that, talking all this mess about deadly force. Wait, I
Because
believe it was more embarrassing that the fact that he got put on his ass the way that he did.
and she was like, "That's a Congress. I don't." And I, in my defense, I whipped out my Marine Corps handbook and my big red monster, and I read the specific things in those books to explain that I was acting within the constraints of the law. That this man was proving himself to be a danger to our immediate safety. He had no business. They were told You are allowed to walk around. You may ask questions. The recruits who are standing guards will answer. Do not touch anything. So some dumbass walking over there, it's like, oh, you want to die. You want to die. Because I heard the instructions. This is military equipment. Do not put your hands on the rifles. Do not touch anything. If you're curious, ask a question. They will give you an answer within the best of their capability. Don't touch anything.
Within reason. It's like you're not going to jump down a door if they touch a doorknob to leave the area. But
No, but
but again, it's like they went over there and touched a weapon. They're trying to rip a weapon off a bunk.
it's one thing to go. It's enough. How come I can't get this off there? It's an M16, you numbnuts. You're not supposed to pull it off the bump. What was he then going to do? Point it at somebody? Hoo, 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 hoo.
But again, as soon as that's the thing. According to regulations, as soon as he touches, he becomes a danger. It would have been
7 rules for
again
deadly
if he would
force.
have touched the footlocker, no big deal. If he would have opened the footlocker, he would have been in
Well,
trouble because now he proved himself to be a danger.
luckily, the foot lockers, everybody's foot locker is padlocked.
Hmm.
So you can't get in them. But yeah, there were people. It's like, is there something that you would like? Oh, I was just. Is there something that you need? That's so and so's locker. Do you need panties? Perhaps. And I would say, I'm sorry. Does the It's like Congress. It's like, is the congressman in need of are you in need of tampons? Is the congressman in need of
So in other words,
sanitary
that's how you
napkins or
kind of like
tampons?
dealt with the. It's like
Clean
don't
underwear, perhaps.
don't act silly just because I'm here. It's like, hey, everything is legitimate. Everything is perfectly
Trying
fine.
to get into someone's personal locker because
Right.
there was a piece of tape. You write your name on it.
Hmm.
So they're trying to open. It's like, I'm sorry. Does the congressman need like a pair of panties, a tampon, a do
Some
you
nail
need?
polish.
Yeah, yeah. It's like,
A
is there
shoe shine kit.
lipstick? Is the
A shoe
Congress?
shine kit.
Do you need a bra? And I wouldn't whisper this. I talk loud enough so that anybody within 10, 20 feet can hear the exchange. I'm not going to whisper,
Yep.
And it's like, I'm sorry, is the congressman in need of like sanitary napkins? I can call my DI and see if they have extra sanitary napkins if the congressman needs one. And they would go, no, sorry. It's like, in other words,
And to me, that would have been the statement was like, act right, because now you're getting into that danger zone because you just won't blurt out something like that
oh,
for
yeah.
like something that was a normal question. And if you
No,
would
but if
feel like,
you're going, they told them
hmm
that what the foot lockers are and what the foot lockers are for. Spare uniforms, underwear, blah, blah, blah. So they're trying to
he
get
just
into
wanted some
someone,
stockings. That's all.
they're trying to get into our personal effects.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay,
Do you
you,
need do you need a pair of stockings? I think we could grab a couple for the PX for you.
yeah.
That's
And it's like, I can ask Sergeant Monty for permission to go to the PX if the congressman is in need of like a tampon or something, you know, and it was meant to humiliate.
hmm
Because it's like, maybe if I humiliate you enough, you will get the point that you are trying to go into somebody's personal effects, which is
which
none of your
which
damn.
which now becomes regulation that you're putting somebody in clear and present danger.
And I didn't get in trouble because of the rifle incident because I argued my case. because we had a couple of
You were
lieutenants,
you were within the right. You were within the
you
right.
know, that was a congressman. And I very clearly and loudly stated,
Regulations clearly said this. I
this
called
person,
regulations.
yeah. And once I made it clear that we were in a point of clear and present danger, because they didn't just jiggle it, they were trying to take it off the bunk, even though they were wrapped in chains, heavy chains, and then padlocked. And they were jiggling them like they were trying to get him off. And his excuse became, "Oh, I was just trying to see how secure they were." It's like, sir, they were secure enough that my order state I had the right to snap your spine,
Mm-hmm.
not kill but cripple you. And they were like, "Okay, you know what? Hey, good, go take a walk. Go, go walk for about a mile."
Well, they wasn't sure that if you was angry or anything. It was like, no, you followed regulations. It's like
But it was,
regulations stated that I had to put my hands
and
on
they were,
him at this
and
point.
later Sergeant Monty was like, "Yeah, you're right. He should not have been touching it," and they were told not to put their hands on things of that nature. They could ask you about changing your bunks, what with the rags for changing your bunks and stuff like that, but they weren't supposed to have their hands on the weapons. Everybody is assigned a weapon. I had to, because when they give you a weapon that you then every people don't realize in the military they don't just hand you a weapon. You
It's a
have to
certain
go.
way that they have to hand it to you, or else there's a lot of trouble to be had.
There is you have to go through a process. Each weapon has a serial number. You are given a sheet that says your name have been given this weapon, serial number, blah blah blah. You have to sign that sheet stating the state in which the weapon was in when you received it. And we are told the weapon had better be in that state or better when you hand it back. You have to sign for that. They don't just hand you a weapon. I don't care if it's a sidearm. I don't care if it's a grenade launcher. Everything you are given is assigned to you and you are signed off on it. Because I worked supply.
Mhm.
And when I was in Okinawa, I worked in supply because they love putting me in offices. I don't know why. I wanted to take stuff apart, put it back together, and they were like,
You probably would have hated the Air Force, but you probably would love to be an MP though.
"Yeah, I would have been a good MP." But it was being in supply, because you in supply, I you have to account for every screw. Every screw has a serial number and a nomenclature. And in supply, you have to track how many of these do you have? How many more do you need? Are they going on a float? This is what goes in this box on the float that they can build a truck out of if they need to. They can repair 5 trucks and build a new one. And you have to check and make sure they've got everything on that list. And if they ain't got it, you got to get it. Or if you're doing an inventory, because I had to inventory these lock boxes, they were called, and $8 million they put me in charge of. I ended up with 4 different, what is it? I think not aircraft carriers, but 4 different battleships that Marines were on the floats. In the Marines, it's called going on a float when you were assigned to a naval vessel.
Okay.
And you had to have a lockbox for every unit. So if you were deployed onto land, you had to know if something happened and one of the vehicles was damaged, you could repair it. Or if it was blown to hell, you could build a new one,
Mhm.
which meant you need to have all these parts. And I had to inventory these things, and I'm calling people on ships, giving them authorization. I need to know if you have, and I'm going on list with their supply guys and finding that half of them didn't have what they needed, which means I'm now calling stateside because we only had a third of what they needed to get the rest of it, and then shipping it. So I'm actually authorizing helicopter drops
you,
with this
you just
stuff.
watching things falling out the sky and watching other people going and grabbing it for you could put it in a lockbox, where they could put it in another crate for them to pick it up and drop it somewhere else.
But and then having to then have them call my lieutenant and say, tell Haygood we got it. All of the things that we told her we needed, they were calibrated properly. We have received them all. We are complete. Because my job, because since the lieutenant was in charge of supply, it was his job to make sure that all those boxes, when they left, were complete.
Mhm.
And half of them were not. So, so he made it my job to fix that.
For him to look good at the very end.
Basically,
I
I
mean,
had him.
that's just the nature. That's just the nature of. That's something that I learned very early in JRTC, because I forgot what our unit won, like some high honor within the city here, but they only acknowledged our lieutenant colonel.
Yeah,
And it was messed up because I was the supply officer that made sure that everything got done properly, but yet she was the one that got all the credit and awards and everything. I was like, okay, whatever.
no, I
It's
hated.
like that's when the sergeant major pulled me on the side. It's like that's the privilege of rank. It's like you get used to it when you get higher enough up in the service. You understand that it's like the old school thing about shit rolls downhill, but only accolade stays at the level that it is given.
Yeah, I the one good thing I did like is the guys working on the floats would contact me,
Mhm,
and go, yeah, I know they're kissing your lieutenant's butt and patting him on the head and stuff, but we have what we need. And half of them didn't know that they didn't have what they needed.
mhm,
I would call them and say, "Hey, this is Haygood. I know, I'm Haygood. I'm with, Fleet Marine Force, blah blah blah." Um, and I realized as I'm inventorying your file because we have to update. Half your stuff isn't calibrated, and a good third of your stuff isn't there. I don't know how you got on. I don't know how you were put on a float with an incomplete black box, but I need to fix this. And before I could do any of that, I had to spend, I think it was 4 weeks, learning all of those components. And then, because you have to know all the components and then know what components went where and how, and then go through everything that was sent out and go to the list that you're given of the components that they have.
mhm.
And there were guys going with things that had to, things that had to be calibrated, meters and stuff like that, gauges. And it's like, according to this, you've only been on that float for 4 months, and yet this gauge hasn't been, wasn't it was supposed to have been calibrated 6 months ago, and it wasn't recalibrated. Uh, do you know how to calibrate that? Fine. I'm going to find a new one. I'm going to get it calibrated, and I'm going to have it sent to you. You need to return the uncalibrated one back to me so I can have it recalibrated and put it aside to the next guy, so the next idiot has it.
Right, exactly.
You know, and it was like, and I actually asked the lance corporal above me. It was like, what if in a time of war, if these, I said, right now they're just on training exercises, but what if they actually had to, what if they actually had to go out and found out they were missing a third of the parts, and half the gauges that they needed didn't work right. And
They
he's
would
like,
have to they would have to improvise and be unprepared. That's the thing. And then your butter bar. That's what we call them. Your butter bar would have been in
the
trouble. Your butter bar would be your butter bar would have been in trouble, and shit would have rolled downhill, and they would have been, and he would have been on you. It's like, how come this stuff wasn't done? And it's like, how am I supposed to know it wasn't done until you gave me the information?
you know, and it was like, and that was the part that drove me crazy, because I was constantly having to go to him and say, "Sir, you know, this company, and this company went out with lock boxes, and the lock boxes are incomplete. And half their gauges that were supposed to be calibrated have not been calibrated in over 2 years. And yet somebody 6 months ago signed off on this and sent those things out without inventory." Because he was like, "Yeah, this is overdue. It should be inventoried." It's like, sir, if something went wrong, our people would be dead. And when somebody's parents is suing the government, guess whose head's on the platter? Which is why he let me do what I did, because I
Mm-hmm.
had to, once I found all this out, I then had to go, because he's like, "Well, it'll make me look bad." It's like, well, would you look worse if something happened and our guys couldn't function and they came home and body bags and their wives and girlfriends and mamas and grandmas and whatnot sat and, went to the White House or got in front of the news and asked why. And some enterprising reporter found out that the supply company for motor transport failed to
Even
make.
even worse that you signed off on it.
You signed off on it, or whoever signed off, because he was a our 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 officer in charge, our OIC. He was lazy. He'd like to go to luncheons and stuff like that. And he was a silver bar.
Oh, so he was a first lieutenant.
Hmm. And so he wasn't a boot Louie, but he preferred to, you know, jump to little meetings and luncheons and stuff like that. The actual day to day of making sure that everything he signed off on, he paid no attention to. The only time, and so the only we figured out the only way to get him to pay attention to stuff was to explain how down the road, if things went wrong, it was his head, because whoever was above him was going to put his head on the chopping block.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only way to get him to understand he had to do his job.
And then, like you said, if his head is on the chopping block, anybody that's up under him, he could put on the chopping block along with him.
No, see, because certain things, um, because I found out that he had me when I was before I started working on the lock boxes. My job was the communications clerk, which
Mm-hmm.
means any and all written communications that came into the office. My job was to, because it's not just filing. We had a logbook.
Mm-hmm.
I have to log in every piece, every document that comes in. When was it filed? And I had to learn how to check through the logs, because there are certain documents that can easily be destroyed, like within a certain amount of time. Certain documents we were sitting on that we had to, I had to learn that, oh, these documents can't be destroyed, and I had to give them a report. These documents we're holding, but they can't be destroyed for another 5 years. These documents we are holding can be destroyed in the next 2 years. These documents can be destroyed next year. These documents we can't touch because we just got them, and I would have to give. I had to order. When they stuck me in supply, the filing was so disorganized, and they gave me 2 weeks to fix it.
And that's when you had all the nice pretty words. We started your writing career. We started your writing career because you up here. It's like I have to use my words. And I have to use my words wisely when nobody else can hear them at this point in time.
No, but because when I first got there, it's like, okay, I'm just filing. And they were like, oh, and luckily my lance corporal, because I was PFC, he was a lance corporal. Goes, this used to be my job, and I got buried in it, and I got promoted, and didn't have to do it anymore. So you now have to take this job. So he basically taught me what to do, and then gave me
Mhm.
the Because in the Marines, there's like a pamphlet or something for every job that you do. There's an instruction booklet that lets you know what you know how the regulations for your job. Um, so I had to go and then learn what the regulations were, figure out all of this, how to and I did read the filing system because he didn't do a great job. He would just like throw it all in the file and go, okay, it's done. And
This is a file cabinet. This drawer looks good. Done.
I I had to go through everybody's file cabinets and find half of them were holding documents that they should not have had at all. Half of them had documents that should have been put on the lieutenant's desk, and the lieutenant had stuff that should have been sent to the general's office. But he hadn't signed off because he did. I'm probably going to get a bullet in the head. What the hell?
No, don't say it. Besides,
I'll tell you another
we're
time.
almost three. Yeah, we're almost at 3 hours.
But I had a job that I had to go through forms that I shouldn't have seen, but I had to have the lieutenant had to sign off on it, and like I said, he was lazy,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't understand what the forms meant. So I had to learn to read the codes, so I could then tell him what the forms meant, so he could then sign off on it.
All right. Well, we got to sign off because it's like 2 hours 30 minutes
Shoot,
into it.
yes, and I have half a Milky Way bar.
I know. I was about to say it's like you got to eat.
We had a good day today. We had Diarcos.
Okay.
So I had half an order of cheese fries earlier today. So I had food in my tummy, but I've been holding on to this bad boy.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my they're looking at selling our building. The owner is looking to sell our building, and the agent is coming through tomorrow with a potential buyer. So, and they didn't tell me this until about almost noon when I was at the laundromat.
Again, those words are getting better as a writer.
So, because she was like, I've got an agent coming to check out your unit. And I'm like, am I being evicted? Wait a minute. I signed a lease. You have me for at least 9 more months. You can't just kick me out. Why are you having an agent come view my unit? She's like, oh, we're not kicking you out, but the building make it so they wanna, I want them to come through your unit because you're our best tenant. I'm like, great. I was gonna clean this weekend.
Now you got to clean immediately.
I had to clean tonight and I have to clean tomorrow. So, but to be told about it, I'm at the laundromat. My day had already been planned out. I was going to do laundry, come home, put laundry away, take a nap. I had artwork to scan in. We were going to do the show. I had a few other things to accomplish. I was going to get artwork done afterwards. Tomorrow I was going to get up, whatever I didn't housework, I was going to do dishes. Because I got to run a dishwasher. So it's like, okay, run a dishwasher. If I don't get it done today, I'll run a dishwasher tomorrow. Because every few days it backs up and I have to run it so it'll flush the pipes. So it's like run the dishwasher. And then I could spend the day, now that I've gotten everything set and I got the artwork for the covers done, the initial drawings, I was going to spend tomorrow and part of the weekend getting cover art done.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do that now.
Nope. As soon as you got that phone call, it's like choice words. That what should be the name of your next book. Choice words.
If I ever write my biography, it'll be choice words. It's like, because I love how I make plans. And then, life says, oh, you made that plan. I don't think so. So, yeah, so yeah, let's sign off because I at least have. Hold on, I need to put a heart there. I at least I've got a clean house tonight,
Yep.
and if I'm lucky, I'll get in bed by 2, and
Okay.
then I have to be up by 9, so I can get anything I didn't get done now done. So
All right. So go ahead.
thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for listening to tonight's episode of
That's the thing. We
reminiscence of.
started off with talking about the Bionic Man and Bionic Woman and OSI, and we ended up talking about boot camp and our tours of duty in the military.
I'm sorry. This is all of my fault. I
No, it's
will
not your
take.
fault. It's just the way that the
I
topic
will
brought up.
take the.
Oh,
I will
I'm going
take
to
the
be
hit for
scared. I'm going to
this.
be scared because one of the thumbnails and the topic, the title that we have, it may get us canceled. But to give you a hint of what the thumbnail may be, I will give you the series to look up here.
Okay.
The series is called Cyber 6.
Okay. I will look it up. But yes. So on behalf of Birdie and me, thank you for coming. Whether you're here with us live, whether you're coming in later, thank you for taking the time to sit there and tune in to his insanity. Because, it be crazy up in here. This is my fault. I will own this. This is my fault. I did this. It is my fault. I am sorry. But anyway, if you need to, Elaine Haygood here at YouTube. LensCap Online is my website. Yes, I will be getting it upgraded, and I just ordered the proof copy for and the Coming of Nighttime comic. If the proofs are okay, because some of the folks I know have had trouble with Amazon while others have not. If my proofs are okay, and then I have somebody order a regular comic and it comes out okay, it will go live on Amazon. And then you can go to Amazon and buy it. And hopefully in the next 2 weeks, I will have a very special announcement. But don't want to give it away because we haven't set a date and time yet. So thank you. We love you. We appreciate you. You, you know, you make it worth the doing. Okay? Bye.
And that brings us to me here, where we have to say this episode of Comic Book Spectrum was brought to you by Jeffrey Hayes and Plasma Fire Graphics. If you need a cover for your latest and greatest book or comic book or graphic novel, he is the guy to hit you up. He is the guy to hit up where you can get the actual award-winning work that he has done here. If you don't believe me, take a gander at this video.
You've worked hard and written a great book. Now it's time to give it a great cover. If you're an indie author or small press publisher, Plasma Fire Graphics is your source for affordable cover illustration and graphic design. Plasma Fire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you.
You've seen the video now. Now give Jeffrey Hayes a quick little message here, right there on plasmafiregraphics.com, or hit up his Facebook group for Plasma Fire Graphics. As far as I'm concerned, I will be here Saturday for another episode of From the Desk of a Small Press Publisher. What we're going to talk about, I really don't know as of yet. I don't feel like it's going to be another Ask Joe episode because that was fun. That was fun because we talked about a little bit of everything here. But this Saturday, I just don't know. It's like I'm just trying to figure out what's really going on here. But there will be new comic book pickups for the week, plus accountability as far as what I've been working on and everything, and something that we're going to discuss that is be lively and interactive. So until then, live life, grow, and be well. And I'll see you next week here on Comic Book Spectrum. Have a good evening. And unlike Brian K. Morris, I don't care if you wash your hands, but never, and I do mean never, apologize for being awesome. See ya.